I'm struck, and I'm sure that all the people in the Biden team are struck by the uncanny feeling of déjà vu in a very bad way.
Hello, I'm Guido.
And I'm Waleed Shahid.
And you're listening to Bloc Party, a show about the growing bloc of progressives in Congress and the movements transforming the party's agenda from the outside. Coming to you again, episode 2, recording again from the cardboard box in my apartment.
You record out of a box?
Yes. Waleed, we care about the sound on this podcast.
You know, it's a real Oscar the Grouch. You know that song I Love Trash by Oscar the Grouch? You ever watched Sesame Street?
That's me in quarantine.
People thought episode 1 sounded good acoustically. We got a lot of feedback that it sounded professional.
Yeah, it's because I put the microphone in the box. Okay, this week, our first one-on-one where we sit down with someone we have questions for and we talk it out with them.
So who are you talking to this week?
Well, first I'll tell you a story. I talked to a journalist this week about the cabinet fight, and she said, you know, if the left doesn't win, like if the left doesn't get anything, if, you know, fighting around the cabinet, if it doesn't seem like they changed the decisions at all, I might write a story about, you know, was it really a good use of resources to fight over the cabinet? And I thought, yeah. You know, we are making a choice right now to fight over the cabinet. Why are we making that choice? Well, in part, I think a lot of folks on the left have heard the stories about the Obama transition, and some of us have read those stories in Reed Hundt's book, A Crisis Wasted. Reed Hundt was a member of the Clinton and Obama transition teams. He was the chairman of the FCC from 1993 to 1997, and he wrote a book, A Crisis Wasted, about what he saw. He also interviewed people from the Obama transition team, just recounting how decisions were made and who in the room, from Rahm Emanuel to Larry Summers, had the biggest impact on the approach that the administration took in those early days in 2008.
Yeah, I mean, Elizabeth Warren says that personnel is policy. And while I don't think that, you know, every single cabinet appointment will tell you about the next 4 years of the Biden presidency, it tells you some things. And, you know, there is a fight for the soul of the Biden presidency. And that fight will tell you about where the party is ideologically and where the fault lines are on some of these things. Primarily, the biggest thing it'll tell you is what is going to happen to all the people that were around Joe Biden in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, whose views on economic and social policy are increasingly out of touch with where the party mainstream. And that, I think, is incredibly interesting because it tells you something about, you know, what this podcast is about, the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it has been treated by all factions in the party and by journalists as an opening round of a negotiation or a fight, depending on who you ask, between the left and the incoming administration. And, you know, rereading Reed Hundt's book to get ready for this interview, it was stressful reading Reed's book and then watching news about the transition comes out because I was thinking, oh man, I actually wish that this felt a little lower stakes, but it feels high stakes. So we'll talk to Reed Hundt. I had a great time chatting with him. And then after our one-on-one, we return to group chat, the return of Amira, who was a fan favorite.
Yeah, she was everyone's favorite group chat member because she's not a fucking nerd like us.
I know. Well,
you got to bleep me out when I curse. You didn't bleep me out last time. My mom's going to.
Yeah, I think bleeps are good for comedic effect, you know, but
I know that's how I become more of a fan favorite is through the audio editing process.
All right, well, give you bleeps, Waleed. All right, first Reed Hundt, then group chat. If you're listening, thanks for joining us for episode 2. Thank you to folks who wrote in. If you have a tirade, a comment, a question, confession, you can email blockpartypod@gmail.com. Some folks wrote us with some great ideas for episodes for 2021. Welcome back. Hey, it's Guido. I realize there are a few names of people involved in the Obama transition that Reed and I both mention multiple times, sometimes with a proper introduction, but sometimes without. So if you're not familiar with this cast of characters, don't worry. Here's a short who's who. Rahm Emanuel was Obama's chief of staff during the transition. He went on to be mayor of Chicago, and as you'll hear, was one of the highest-ranking members of the Obama transition team. Larry Summers was the director of Obama's National Economic Council. He was the economist who, alongside Rahm Emanuel, made pivotal decisions regarding Team Obama's approach to the crisis. Christy Romer was the chairwoman of Obama's National Economic Council. She's a recognized expert on the Great Depression, and she led the all-important work of measuring the economic crisis as it was happening and proposing a stimulus to match it. And on the team with them was Reed Hundt, a lawyer who's worked in and out of the Democratic Party since the early 1980s, including as the Clinton administration's FCC chairman and as a member of Obama's 2008 transition team, alongside Rahm, Summers, and Christy Romer. Enjoy. Reed Hundt, welcome to Block Party.
Thanks very much for having me.
How are you doing today?
Not so bad.
All right. So Reed, your book is called A Crisis Wasted. The titular crisis was the great financial crisis of 2008. Banks were failing, homeowners couldn't pay their mortgages, and the fears of millions of Americans defaulting, and banks without money were leading the country into recession. But what is it in your mind that is wasted in that moment?
So the chief of staff picked by Barack Obama 12 years ago in November, this is November 2020, that was November 2008, said a crisis is too good to waste, by which he meant you can get the attention of everybody in the country, you can get the attention of all the businesses, and especially you can get the attention of Congress to take action, as opposed to being biased against all kinds of action. When there's a crisis and everybody knows something has to be done. They all know something has to be done, but they don't all agree on what it is. Still, if you're the president or president-elect, you've got their attention. So that was the big point that Rahm Emanuel made. It was exactly right. Now, the question is, with everybody's attention and a consensus around action, what was it that Barack Obama and Joe Biden were going to try to persuade Congress to do and to have the American people support? That was the question. So the decision that was made was number one, to focus on recapitalizing banks, to put Wall Street back together again, to glue Humpty Dumpty of Wall Street back together again. And secondarily, to spend with federal money only that which was necessary to get unemployment down just below 8% 2 years later. And so the decision that was made then was get what you can get from Congress without scaring the American people, and it'll be enough if it's around $700 billion. It's a big number. It'll be enough to get unemployment down below 8%. The next decision that was made was don't have that spending be part of structural change in the economy. Just have it be good things to spend money on, but don't try to accomplish something fundamental that will create millions and millions of new jobs over a long period of time. Don't do what Franklin Roosevelt did in the New Deal. Instead, pour new wine into old bottles. Keep with the exact same programs that already exist in government. Don't try to do anything new. Why? If we try to do something new, it'll take longer to explain it to the American people and longer to explain it to Congress, and we really need to spend this money in a hurry. The result of all that is that the amount of money that was spent proved to be too small to deliver the goal, which was unemployment down below 8% by the midterms. The result of that was that the Democrats lost the midterms very, very badly. And then the other result is that it proved to be very disappointing to not have effected fundamental structural change in the economy when there might have been a chance to do so.
What's fascinating about your book is that as I read it and as you reconstruct why and how the Obama administration ends up, in your words, wasting that crisis, not being ambitious enough, choosing only to reconstruct the financial system as it was, we, the reader, realize slowly, almost like a horror story, that it is the choices of who gets put in these powerful positions at these pivotal moments that end up, in your argument, defining the rest of the presidency.
So look, Barack Obama wanted to have a really all-star team of economists, and he got an all-star team. He wanted an all-star team of political advisors, and he got an all-star team. I'm talking about Larry Summers and Jared Bernstein and Christy Romer and Rahm Emanuel and just all of them. A truly spectacular team, experienced, knowledgeable, thoughtful.
And just for our listeners who don't know, briefly, who is Larry Summers and what role does he play on the transition team?
Oh, well, Larry Summers was then and probably still is now the most prominent public intellectual in the field of economics of his generation. In 2008, he had recently been the president of Harvard. In the Clinton administration, he'd been the secretary of the Treasury and performed other roles as well. And Larry was then and still is unmatched in acuity and argumentative skills and the special capability to advise presidents. So, by Larry's own account, the critical moment in the decision making is when Rahm Emanuel, the named chief of staff, told Larry that the stimulus could not start with the T, meaning T for trillion. It's hindsight is what history is. It's a synonym for history. And hindsight is what tells us now something that they did not then know. And it actually had several components. Here's part one of the book called Things They Did Not Know. Right? Part one, the economic downturn that was going on in November and December 2008 was much, much more severe than they imagined. They didn't have the data to know. The very first week in December 2008, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported the unemployment numbers for November, the month that had just concluded. And Christy Romer looked at it and said, I'm paraphrasing, but here's what she said: holy cow. This is so much worse than we thought when we looked at the October numbers, and so much worse than when we looked at the September numbers. The trends are terrible. It's getting worse at a faster pace. People are getting laid off at record rates. The businesses of America obviously have freaked out because of the financial crisis. So consequently, I've got to redo the math and figure out how big the hole in the economy is and figure out how public spending needs to step in a bigger way to make up for the evaporation of private spending, private investment. So she does the math and it comes out somewhere in the range of 1.2 to 1.7 trillion, and even a little more wouldn't have been so bad. And she goes to Larry Summers and he says, there's no possible way that we can tell people that because I've already been told that Congress can't stomach it.
By Rahm Emanuel.
By Rahm Emanuel. And maybe he had other sources, I don't know. So he says, we're not going to put that in a memo. The memo might leak. That could be embarrassing. And I know you got to write the memo by December 15, which is close. So don't put those numbers in there. But here's what I will let you do, says Larry. You can walk into the meeting and get everybody's attention, and you can figure out how to get their attention, and you can dramatize the moment because it deserves drama. So she decides that the way she's going to do this is she's going to come into the meeting, and she does on December 16, and she says, Mr. President, this is your holy shit moment. And this is in Obama's book, which now corroborates the story. Well, of course, everybody is a little bit shocked because it's just not the kind of phrase you'd expect to see coming out of a distinguished economist's mouth in a decision meeting like this. But then she elaborates and says, you know, you've got about a 1 in 3 chance of this country going into a Great Depression. And everyone is shocked. Now, when we unpack this, what we really don't know is just exactly why everybody's there still stuck to the political opinion that they shouldn't ask Congress for that much money, for a number above $1 trillion. But they stuck to that opinion. Everything else was changing, but they stuck to the opinion that they shouldn't ask Congress for more money. Nevertheless, that was the key moment. It was the holy shit moment. Everybody involved probably wishes that somehow they had decided on a bigger package.
Is it true that Obama never even sees the larger proposals from a member of his team, economist Christy Romer, because Larry Summers strikes them from the memo? It's true that he never even knows that number is considered?
When you look at the decision memo, you can't see any evidence of the economists telling the president-elect that the stimulus should be much more than $1 trillion. It's not in the memo. All the way through it, from the beginning to the end, there are numerous cautions against a stimulus greater than about $800 billion. So I guess we have to say, by no means did Obama get a forceful and urgent explanation of the economic necessity of spending a lot more money. In retrospect, they decided too soon how big the stimulus needed to be. If they had just waited another 4 to 6 weeks, they would have had a better grasp on the depth of the problem, the size of the hole in the economy, and then they would have realized we just need a lot more money to fill that hole. So that decision about size was made tragically just a few weeks too early. That's the first thing. The second thing is they were firm believers as a group in the view that the federal deficit really could not be too big, because if it ever got to be too big, the financial markets would freak out and there might be another financial crisis. That was a view that had been held in Washington for the previous several decades, all the way back to the 1980s. And it's a view that by 2012, all the participants in the Obama decision-making came to regret. They came to believe that that was a fundamental theoretical error. And hopefully that's not a error that'll be repeated now, as the same kinds of decisions have to be made. What's the point of all this? Oh gosh, let's not have the same thing play out now 12 years later, right? Let's make sure that the same people, or not all the same, but many of the exact same people in the same kind of dramatic circumstances with a different cause for the downturn, a pandemic instead of a financial crisis. Let's just make sure that they remember all of these events and say, well, if we're going to make any mistakes, let's make new mistakes.
There's a story on the left that I think is critical of Obama that says Obama was sort of always harboring this conservatism, this adherence to Clinton-era policymaking that said, don't make the government too big, don't balloon the deficit, don't spend too much money, just let the markets and let Wall Street do its thing and restore the market to the place it needs to be to do its thing. But in your book, I think you really reconstruct 2008 Obama running as a progressive in early 2008, right?
Obama, as a candidate, was calling for major structural change. He gave a speech at Cooper Union in March of 2008 that laid out the fundamentals of major structural change. He came in to fundamentally change the healthcare system to make it better, to change the energy platform of the country from carbon to clean, to solve the immigration problem in some profound and enduring way. He didn't, as a candidate, when he announced in 2007, have a plan for dealing with a financial crisis that was still a year and a half off. But that crisis hit him and everybody else in the world like a truck that jumps the street and hits the pedestrian on the curb, right? So what he said to his advisors, and this is also in his own memoir as well as my book, what he said to his advisors was not, let's do something moderate. He said the opposite. He said, let's solve this, and then let's move on to do all these other major structural changes.
Liberals and the left have criticized the Obama transition, both at the time and in hindsight, for refusing to budge from their initial calculation that nothing above $1 trillion could pass through Congress. Even at the time, in early January 2009, as new, worse economic data was coming in, as you said, economists like Paul Krugman wrote that Team Obama's stimulus seemed, quote, too weak. But again, Team Obama's highest-ranking advisors didn't adjust their policy. The reply to this criticism then, to people like Krugman, and now, from both Rahm Emanuel and some journalists, has always been nothing bigger could have passed through Congress. Is that true, Reed? What did we know in your mind about what was and wasn't possible in that moment?
There's one thing that is knowable and one thing that is not knowable. What is knowable is that the composition of the stimulus could have enabled greater spending. So, for example, if you put in the stimulus a green bank that is going to attract private sector investing along with its own money, you're going to end up with more bang for the buck. If you increase Social Security, you're going to end up with more spending. These are the nuances of congressional budgeting. Some numbers in a stimulus produce more spending than other numbers. Money dedicated to Social Security or unemployment will turn out to be more spending if there are more people that need it. So those are composition questions. And it was knowable then, and it's knowable now, that if the composition had been different, the spending would have been bigger. Here's what's not knowable. It's not knowable whether if Barack Obama, with his huge election victory, had taken to Congress and taken to the American people a bigger stimulus, whether public opinion would have persuaded the senators to vote yes. We do know, because all the people in the House said so, we do know that the House Democrats would have passed a bigger bill. On the Senate side, the question had to be, will the president try for more? And that's the exact same question that's presented to President-elect Biden right now.
So let's talk about Biden. Your book begins with a statement of purpose. When the next crisis creates the necessity and the chance to change history, this book is supposed to help the country and its leaders follow that guidance. Details about Biden's transition team are trickling out. We're getting news every day. Would you be so kind as to read the tea leaves for us thus far?
Mostly I'm struck, and I'm sure that all the people in the Biden team are struck by the uncanny feeling of déjà vu in a very bad way. Meaning, here we are, we just got elected. It's a famous victory. It was a big victory. The national popular vote margin for Biden is 6 million plus or minus. He's gotten more votes across the country than any candidate for president in history. In fact, he's gotten more votes than have ever been cast in any democracy not named India in the history of humanity. This is a big victory, and yet he walks into a situation where, the average reporter is telling him, Mitch McConnell's not going to do what you think is best, which is exactly the same senator in the same, position that Barack Obama faced, right? Mitch McConnell won't go along with you. So there's this, feeling of déjà vu. Huge victory. Mitch McConnell is the obstacle, and instead of a financial crisis shaking America's economy to the core, we have a pandemic that actually has the following two results: immense human tragedy. By the time the pandemic is finally quelled, we will have lost about the same number of people dead because of the virus as combatants in World War II. I hope not quite as big, but that's the path that we're on. And it's been impossible for people to get jobs. It hasn't even been that they're all reporting as unemployed. There's something like 20 million people, more than 10% of the workforce, that isn't technically unemployed. They just can't go to work. So right. It's a different kind of economic crisis, but if anything, it's a bigger economic crisis. So here we are, with this horrible version of deja vu. And so what is President Biden and his vice president-elect, Harris, what are they going to ask their advisors? Well, tea leaf reading. First, okay, folks, how much can you get from the rump Congress, to help get the economy going again? And that's the Congress that will adjourn sometime before Christmas, somewhere over the next 30 days. What's that Congress going to do? And job one for that Congress is to make sure that money is provided to the public healthcare system in a variety of ways. That's job one, because now we have the glittering prospect of these vaccines. So can we get that done right away? That's thing one. And now thing two. Thing two is what I predict will be the defining moment of the Biden presidency and maybe of the future of the United States. It's not too much to say that. And that will be the true big economic recovery package that has a size and a composition that we will know by the time that Joe Biden is inaugurated on January 2021. So here's what we're going to know by that date. Just how disrupted is this economy? I believe we're going to know by that date a great deal about our ability to quell the virus and how long that will take. It's about 2 months from now, and I think by then we'll know a great deal about that. Also, we will know by January 20 a lot more about just how many tens of millions of people need to find new work and well-paid work. And what was denied to Barack Obama was accurate insight in December. That will be available to Joe Biden on or about the date that he's inaugurated. And so the big battle will be those who really do want to build back better and give us a clean power platform and ubiquitous broadband and clean water and really efficient, workable sewage system and great transportation, the 5 basic infrastructure platforms. And that will be a choice for one side of the one part of the country, I think a strong majority of the country, and definitely the Democrats. And then the question will be what Republicans in the House and the Senate will sign up to that? Or will we face just a total blank wall of obduracy and an absolute refusal to build back better? But that's the battle royale. That's the defining moment. That's the crisis that won't be wasted. And now, if you ask me how it's going to come out, I got to tell you, I'm betting on Joe Biden, Mr. Charm. And I'm betting on the American people because not just the 80 million who voted for him, but lots of other millions are going to want that infrastructure build out to give us a better America.
I appreciate your optimism. It's great to hear these days. I do wonder if you're worried that some of the mistakes of the Obama transition could be repeated in the personnel choices, that a president comes in with a mandate, but the personnel in the room, in the numbers that they strike from the memos, in the way that they present the options, in their analysis of what's politically possible, constrain the administration quite early.
So I have to confess to being a bit of an oldster here. The Biden administration is definitely an alumni group. They want to do the right thing. They want a legacy move. They want America to build back better. And we have to look at what Joe Biden actually said as a candidate. The things he said about the transition from carbon to clean are the boldest, most dramatic, and most visionary statements of any presidential candidate in American history. He wants $2 trillion invested in the transition from carbon to clean. In one of the debates, he even said we have to have a transition from carbon to clean. And a bunch of naysayers said, oh, now he's going to lose votes in Pennsylvania. Well, he actually won Pennsylvania, okay? And he's the one who also said we have to have zero emissions electricity by 2030, which is, a decade away. So what am I saying? His statements have been bold. His promises are dramatic. He wants to be a legacy president. We really need to be optimistic. There are a lot of people in Washington now who are acting like somehow the Democrats lost this election. We won big, and big is the way that we've got to act.
Reed Hundt, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you to Reed Hundt for joining us one-on-one. Now, another group chat. I slide into Amira and Waleed's DMs to find out what's going on in the fight for the soul of the Biden administration. Amira, a fan favorite from episode 1, to be honest. Amira, how are you doing?
Aww. People don't know me yet. That's why I'm the fan favorite. I'm doing well, It's looking forward to taking a few days off. Hopefully the Biden team doesn't drop any bombs.
Waleed, the question we're all asking. Are you always going to be so mad on group chat as you were on episode 1? You were fiery. People were like, this heat from this guy Waleed. Who is he?
What's funny is that I met Zephyr Teachout for the first time in person a couple months ago, and she was like, you are so much more mild-mannered than I expected you to be based on your online persona.
That's right.
And I was like, that's never happened to me before. So I don't know how people experience me in my political life versus my interpersonal life, but
yeah, you didn't think that you could be yourself on the first group chat. You're like, people are coming here from Twitter, and that's where I'm spicy. But little do people know that I'm a quiet, mild-mannered man. So Waleed, Amira, since we last talked, the left put out a slate of proposed picks for President-elect Joe Biden for his cabinet. And since then, he has announced a number of his cabinet picks, not all of them, but just to name a few. John Kerry named special climate envoy and Biden's chief of staff, Ron Klain, also teased a domestic climate czar in response to a tweet from Varshini Prakash of the Sunrise Movement saying, hoping to see a domestic equivalent. And Ron Klain said, stay tuned. Former CEO of the Democratic Leadership Council, which was the Clintonite organization in the 1980s, the former CEO of the DLC deficit hawk Bruce Reed has been floated for a potential pick for Office of Management and Budget. Not officially picked yet, though. Janet Yellen picked for Treasury, Antony Blinken, as Secretary of State, Alejandro Mayorkas to lead the DHS. That pick received some praise from Congresswoman Jayapal and the leadership of immigrant rights groups like United We Dream. So, what do you make of the picks so far?
So there's no one on this list who is super popular with the progressive movement, and there's no one on this list who is super popular with the third way or the conservative wing of the Democratic Party. It seems like Joe Biden is going forward with a do no harm strategy, picking people who are relatively non-controversial for these first.
The officially confirmed people.
Confirmed
Guido
people.
also had Bruce Reed in there, which is a different subject.
In terms of the officially confirmed people, a lot of these people are folks who worked in the Obama administration. People have experience with working with them or even pushing them. The other thing about some of these picks that have been made, in terms of John Kerry in particular, I think it's significant that one of the first picks he makes is dedicated to the climate crisis internationally and the climate crisis as it pertains to American national security, and shows how much the climate crisis is going to be a major part of Joe Biden's agenda. John Kerry is no progressive hero, but just the fact that that position exists, I think, is a good sign.
Yeah. It's been all right. That's the official. No, that's not the official company line. The official company line is, we are encouraged.
Amira breaking the fourth wall here.
Okay, all right. This is what I logged on. This is what I slid into the DMs for, right? My next question is, tell us how you really feel about Bruce Reed floated at OMB.
All right. So Bruce Reed, he is a true believer in the third way, okay? He is somebody who fundamentally believes that the triangulation, walking a fiscally conservative line, toning it down on cultural issues, and actually pretty much screwing working people should be the path forward. This is what he has advocated for his whole career, which is a really long time. And, folks might say, okay, Amira, here's the thing. All right, the crime bill, that was over 20 years ago. Welfare reform 96, that was over 20 years ago. People can evolve, people change, people, as the center of gravity moves in the Democratic Party, people can evolve their views, and, y'all can't judge somebody off of what they did decades ago. And I'm like, bet, yes, I love that journey. Love personal growth. That is great. We want that. However, this is not
We
the
support
case.
Personal growth at the Block Party.
We do. We support personal growth. We support therapy. We support, understanding that people can change. Okay. We want people to join the movement. We're not gatekeepers. All of that is true. This is very true. However, Bruce Reed cannot sit with us. Okay. So, and this is why. I'll tell you why. He has been.
But Amira, I have to say, I know Bruce Reed. He's a friend of mine. He's a good guy. Why are you so harsh on Bruce? These are other things happening in the group chat, Guido. Other group chats are like, well, Bruce is okay.
I was going to ask. I feel like I see folks who are closer to the Democratic Party in DC saying, hey, past is not prologue. And then I see folks on the left going, hey, the past is never really past. And just journalists trying to choose between which is the right take on the cabinet.
We got to do a whole Bruce Reed episode and welfare reform and really get into the details as to what all of these things meant and how we can actually now, via hindsight, via history, judge those decisions. And by the way, the 1996 welfare reform bill, right? That was very controversial, even in its time. That was not something wildly, accepted and hailed as a good thing within the Democratic Party. Somebody in actually one of the cabinet members actually quit over this because it was so bad and controversial. It was on the power of Bruce Reed that this shit happened.
This bill,
so he got to own it.
The 1996 welfare reform bill that Bruce Reed was one of the architects of was so controversial at its time that Nancy Pelosi voted against it. Nancy Pelosi, leftist superhero, Nancy Pelosi voted against the 1996. John Lewis voted against the 1996 welfare reform bill. There are several other people here who did not. Elliot Engel voted against the 1996 welfare reform bill. Bruce Reed co-authored a book with Rahm Emanuel called The Plan, in which the two of these guys describe the 1996 welfare reform bill as one of the most miraculous achievements in social experimentation. So it's not like they had a mea culpa 10, 12 years later. They were writing this as a significant achievement, showing that it's not personal, it's ideological, it's about your governing agenda, it's what your vision is for what American society could be.
Yeah, I mean that, when you read Crisis Wasted by Reed Hundt, you really get this sense that when some folks from Clinton's administration, especially Clinton's economic teams, become part of Obama's transition, you get a real shift away from a potentially more progressive direction that Obama's early advisors were banking on. Reed really reconstructs that fork in the road. And here we are again, talking about an official from the Clinton administration in a presidential transition.
We haven't even talked about Bull Simpson yet. Where's the ideology goes from this into, hey, what if Democrats work with Republicans to cut the deficit by putting cuts to Social Security on the table? Who was the executive director of that commission? Bruce Reed.
Hey,
Let's talk about it, folks.
the guy has goals. He wants to cut Social Security. He has goals in life.
You're right. At least it's a goal. On Tuesday, Justice Democrats, Social Security Works, Data for Progress launched a petition calling for Bruce Reed not to be appointed in the Biden administration. And it was supported by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congressman-elect Jamal Bowman, Congresswoman-elect Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. And in the same way that Joe Biden said that his campaign was a fight for the soul of America, we are going to be in, and we are currently in, a fight for the soul of the Biden presidency. And rejecting Reed from the Biden administration will tell us a lot about what the soul of the Biden presidency will be. So it's exciting that progressives are having their voices heard. And it's not all doom and gloom. Like you said earlier, Guido, Congresswoman Jayapal has showered praise onto some of the cabinet picks. People were happy about John Kerry getting this position. So there's sometimes this characterization where progressives are all no, no, no all the time, but it's not the reality.
Actually, Joe Biden and co, we're trying to help you save yourself from yourself because, I'm a big fan of grounding this in what the realities of like what we're doing are, right? Like it's about people. Ayanna, Congresswoman Presley always says, don't lose the plot, and the plot is the people. Typically, that is my shtick, and I love that. I'm going to take a moment to talk about politics. If people do not feel like you are going to serve them and actually have results in a very short amount of time, 2022 is around the corner. And you know what? 2024 is around the corner as well. So, we're not complaining. We're just helping you help yourself.
And people want me to be more funny. And I've heard you. I hear you. And therefore, I have an Abraham Lincoln quote about this episode.
We're letting them do it, folks. We let him bring his Civil War history to the group chat. We'll allow it.
Hold on, I gotta pull it up. So a lot of the coverage in mainstream media about some of the pressure campaigns around the Biden cabinet are like often people frame these as interpersonal disputes rather than disputes about ideas and governance and vision. And it reminds me of this great quote from Abraham Lincoln where he says, he's responding to abolitionists in his party, and he says, "They are nearer to me than the other side in thought and sentiment, though bitterly hostile personally. They are utterly lawless, the unhandiest devils in the world to deal with, but after all, their faces are set Zionwards." So me reading this quote now is I'm like, can you guys come up with better material? Lincoln just has so many words to describe this. Don't call me a fucking terrorist. You can say my face is set Zionwards. That's fine. It's nicer.
Lincoln is looking at the factional conflict in his party, and he's just writing this poetry.
I know. It's just like, and then for people to be like, oh, like, he's my colleague, he's my friend, he's a nice guy.
I feel like, Waleed, you like this quote because you wish that more folks at the center of power in the Democratic Party would give you Politico quotes like this, like, Waleed and me, like we're both looking at the North Star of progress. Even though I wouldn't trust him with a dime, he's the unhandiest devil in the world. Waleed and I, we agree on some things. You're like, why aren't you saying that about me in Politico?
It's just funny, man. It's funny. It's just about leadership. I think someone like Lincoln understands in that quote, he's like, I understand what they're trying to do here. And they're annoying, but at least we're moving toward the same goal. We talk about Rahm.
I'm waiting to see how much gas you got in the tank today.
All right, let's go. So Rahm Emanuel is being considered for transportation secretary. Then there was some pushback, and then there was floated that he would be considered for U.S. trade representative. Rahm Emanuel should be nowhere near the White House. He should probably not be anywhere near the Democratic Party. He should not be anywhere near politics. There's lots of, like, he could, Joe Crowley is a lobbyist for video games. Rahm Emanuel could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just disgusted that we're discussing Rahm Emanuel as being brought in to serve in any capacity. He covered up a murder, okay? And the very idea that he's still not just accepted into polite society, but people are considering elevating him into a position of power is just beyond words. I mean, I don't think they will do it because they don't want that smoke. That is about Rahm Emanuel. That's not even a Bruce Reed conversation. That is like as persona non grata as it gets. Bruce Reed is also bad, but I don't know, I mean, he hasn't, as far as we know, covered up a murder. So, I can't fully put him in the same category, but he basically has used the welfare queen rhetoric of Ronald Reagan and carried that through into kicking a whole bunch of working class people off of like any social safety programs. So different, but also bad.
Rahm Emanuel. He was not great as chief of staff for Barack Obama when he said nothing with a T, and he was even worse as mayor of Chicago, as Amira just said. And as Waleed's been saying, some things you should leave outside the party tent, and that conduct is disqualifying.
It's pretty noteworthy that like Obama starts out with people like Rahm Emanuel, Larry Summers, Timothy Geithner, Arnie Duncan. These are all people who are very much from the Bill Clinton third way ideology of,
and some are actual Republicans.
right. These are people who have a certain ideology that was formed because of the Reagan consensus and because of their experience in the Bill Clinton administration. That's, you can't go too far on racial justice. You can't go too far on spending and investment. Can't be too friendly with unions. And the fact that Biden is not starting out with that same crew of people is significant and a sign of progress. And so, we've spent a lot of today's show talking about those people, but so far they have not been appointed. So that is a step forward.
That was group chat, folks. Amira, thank you. Amira, say something so I have a little audio of you saying goodbye to me, and it sounds like we're friends.
Can we just wait? I have never met Waleed, Guido, or Becca, who y'all don't hear, but she's our badass producer. Never met these people in real life. This is what happens when you start a job during a pandemic. But we all become fast friends.
Wow. All right. Waleed, thank you.
Thank you, Guido.
Okay, folks, that was Group Chat. My name is Guido Girgenti. Our producer is Becca Rose. Our mix engineer is Leslie Gaston-Bird. Special thanks to Amy Westervelt and Michael Catano for all their help. See you on the block.